Ois Dalet. So the Rebbe was explaining that we're mamshim, the simcha atzmis, to Chochmah and Bina, so that later on Chochmah and Bina will be mamshich the simcha into Zov and Nukva, into the lower level, Zo Malchus. And now the Rebbe explains the whole idea that everything has to be done b'simcha. But in order to really achieve, ultimately you need a simcha atzmis, a simcha of essence, and that comes down in Chochmah Ubina, and then it goes down to Zav. Let's look inside. So the idea is the Hine Avodas Hashem Tzorich Liyos B'Simcha. The service of the Eibishter has to be with joy. And that's obvious a pasuk, because K'moshe Kosuf, the pasuk says, Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha, serve God with joy. And then there's another pasuk that tells us that the great problems that come when you don't serve Hashem with joy. The pasuk says, Tachas asher lo yavadito, es Hashem elekecha b'simcha v'tuv levo. Since you had not served Hashem your God with joy and gladness of heart, so the pasuk gives there all of the calamities that take place was you didn't serve Hashem b'simcha v'tuv levo. That tells us how important it is to serve Hashem with joy, with simcha v'tuv levo. Now, one can think to serve Hashem when you daven, when you learn, when you do mitzvahs. That's when you're serving Hashem. You have to do it with simcha. But the Rebbe points out now, every part of our life is serving Hashem. And therefore, it all has to be done b'simcha. All of life has to be b'simcha because you're always serving Hashem. Let's look inside. A person needs to serve Hashem in all of his matters, as we say in the pasuk. All your actions, whatever you do, even though it's not mitzvahs, it's maasecha, still they need to be for shem shamayim. Meaning, what you're doing maasecha, you're still serving Hashem. It's l'shem shamayim. We say to Mizu, more than just maasecha l'shem shamayim, we say b'chol drachecha. That every your ways, whatever you're doing, you know Hashem in all your ways. So, which means even in the very mundane things, drachecha, you still got to know Hashem. Maasecha l'shem shamayim b'chol drachecha. So that means that everything we do, we're serving Hashem. And actually, as the Mishnah says, that we were created to serve Hashem. So that means that's our whole creation. That's why we're here. So we always got to do the purpose of our creation. This, serving the Eibishter and everything we do, is Tachlis Kol Briyosei. That's the goal of his entire why he was created in the first place. K'mayim Razal, as our sage of blessed memory say, Ani loy nivreisi elo l'shamash koini. I was not created but for the purpose to serve Eibishter. So basically, b'chol drachecha de'eyu and b'chol masecha l'shem shamayim. This is why we were created for. Hari nimtzom. So since we're always serving Hashem, shetzarich liyas tamid b'simcha, that you always have to be simcha. So while we see that we always have to be b'simcha, but yet we realize that simcha has different categories. The Rebbe is going to explain. There is simcha in Eim Habonim Smecha in Bina, and then there's additional simcha. But first the Rebbe says there is various different categories of simcha. Like we see, Elisha b'simcha yesh chiluke dargas. There are different steps in simcha. There's different places of simcha, and there's different times of simcha. The Rebbe says first in place, the yesh mekoymes yichodim shehem mekoymes shel simcha. There are place in space. There are special places. Those are places of simcha. Ukamoi, for example, binyan shel simcha, the structure of joy. That's a place that is meant for simcha, for a marriage, for other things, which is done. Find in the Gemara, there is like not to build during fast days, not to build a building of simcha. So there is places which are called, designated as simcha. While we always have to be simcha everywhere, but yet there's places of simcha. There's also times of simcha. Same thing is true as it relates to time. The yesh zmanim miyuchadim. There are special times. Yomim tovim, those are holidays. Shehem moyadim lesimcha. They are the times for joy. While we're serving the Eibishter every day, and all of the service has to be done with joy, but there is specific days that are considered joy, which is the festivals we're giving to Simcha. And within the festivals itself, there's also differences. Even within the festivals, yesh chilukei dargos, there are different steps. Ukemoi chagas sukkos, festival sukkos, in addition to being one of the moyadim l'simcha, we also say in the davening, shehu gam zman simchaseinu. We only say that with sukkos. It's a time of our rejoicing, which means within the moyadim l'simcha, which all holidays share, there's a special simcha in the simcha of sukkos. Ubifrat, and within simcha of sukkos, when we go more details specifically, the simchas beis hashayeva, the simcha that took place in the beis hashayeva when they used to draw the water that they would pour later on the mizbeach, was a tremendous simcha. And the Gemara says about that simcha, the misha leiro, simchas beis hashayeva, one who did not witness, did not see the joy of the beis hashayeva, leiro simcha miyomo, doesn't know, hasn't seen joy from his day, because this was the ultimate level of joy. And over there, shahoyu merakdim ba'avukos shel oir, they would be dancing with the flames of fire. They used to have flames and used to throw them up like in concession, like to juggle them. And this actually represents the avukos shel oir heim bechinas chochma. That is the level of chochma that we were talking about before, that there is simcha and oineg in chochma and bina. So the avukos of light, the flame, the sparks of light, is chochma, bechinas chochma. What does it mean to dance with them? V'inyan ha'adikut ba'avukos yamshocha de bechinas chochma b'bina. That's bringing down from the level of chochma into bina. So basically, and that's the hamshocha, and later on that we're talking about samach to samach, but to bring down to chochma bina, to bring down to zav and nukva. But these are very profound and very high levels. We're talking about avukos shalor, we're talking about chochma, we're talking about bringing it down. So it's not just a regular simcha. Simcha in the level of chochma, very high. Now, that's the level of chochma, to bring it down in bina. And there also, within, just trying to point out, there's so many different levels of simcha, but ultimately, real simcha, the Rebbe is going to say, is the simcha b'li gvul, which is higher than this. There's two categories of simcha. There is a simcha where it's attached to reason, to limit, and there is a simcha which is unlimited. All these simchas, while there's different levels, but they're still one common, they're all limited. And then you have the simcha which is higher than limitation. So, and it brings out the gam simcha zugufa. Even in this joy, we're talking about the joy of chochma bringing to bina, the meragdim. There's also yesh chiluk in dargos. There's different levels. Not everybody was throwing these fires. The one who was dushari who was the one that would do the simchas beis hasheva, elo gedol chachma Yisrael. That was the great amongst the sages of Israel. But the rest of the people, they came to see and to hear, which means they weren't really in the actual throwing, in the actual simcha, but just to witness it, which means there's differences even in this great simcha. Ubefrat, and then goes even a more detailed simcha, is simchas Torah. Shah simcha, the simchas Torah, the joy of simchas Torah, he nailis yoser gam simcha, the simchas beis hasheva. That's at a higher level even than the simcha beis hasheva is simchas Torah. Kedalisa b'lekuta Torah, as we find in the Lekuta Torah. To the extent simchas Torah's name is simcha, it's called simchas Torah. That means that this is the highest level of simchas. To the extent that the name of simchas Torah, a name means that that is what it is. The shmoishel kol davar, the name of every item points to what it is and its energy. Simchas Torah is the joy of the Torah. So it's called simcha. So we have the various different levels of simcha, the Mikol Zamuban. So from all this, it's understood. Sheyesh kama v'kama dargis b'simcha. There are many, many different steps in simcha. You can't say, oh, somebody already has simcha, why do we have to give him more simcha? Because you may have one level of simcha to give you a higher level. Simcha has different parts. But generally speaking, you can split up these simchas into two categories. Simcha shemurkeves me'eze double. A simcha which is combined with something. Simcha shemitzada soga seichel yecirych. Say a joy that comes because you grasp an idea or similar, that's a simcha which is connected to something. The simcha zuhi b'koiches hagaluyim. This simcha is, when it's limited and it's combined, it's in the revealed powers. V'hi begeder hagabola, and that is defined. It's limited in limitation. It has the boundaries of limitation. That's one category. One category is basically a limited simcha tied to the something in the revealed koiches. That simcha is a simcha which is within limitation. The simcha atzmis, then you have an essence simcha. Shehi ve'ikra be'atzmis, she, and its main is mainly the essence of the nefesh, shalamaylo migeder hagbola, which is beyond the restrictions, the fence of limitation. It has no limit. These are, while we have different categories of simcha, but the main two categories, Rebbe explains, is a simcha which is a limited, which is hinged, depends, and is combined from something which is limited. And then you have the simcha of the soul, the essence of the soul, which is not limitation. That's an unlimited simcha. The Rebbe is going to explain now that we can understand is that we say that simcha can breach through limitations. What simcha are we talking about? We're talking about the simcha of the etzem hanefesh, as the Maimer explains over there. Because simcha can change a person, what he has been accustomed to, make a change in the person. When he is joyful, he goes through, breaks through his usual, customary, what he's accustomed to. More than that, simcha can break through and change your nature that you were born with. So if you're born like a stingy person, but when you're a simcha and you're making a wedding, you can become like somebody who is naturally a spender and splurges without any limitations. And the simcha changes you. How does simcha have the power to change this entire person from one extreme to the other. It doesn't take time. It happens at the time that he burst out with joy. There's such a change. Rebbe explains because when we talk about that simcha is the etzem hanefesh simcha. Since it's the essence of your soul, it's not limited by all your limitations. When it comes out similar to Ratzon, when it's a will, it's a makif, it takes over and you become the simcha. Let's look inside. You will understand it based on what's explained in the Maimer over there. That the nature of joy is to break through fences, breaks through limitation. The Hainu kol hagdora v'hagbola shebenefesh. All of fence limitations of the soul, joy breaks it through. It explains in two ways what it means. A person is boxed in, a person is fenced in, a person has limitation. One is limitation that he got used to, the other one that he was born with. The first way is that this joy breaks through the fences that come to the person because he got used to it. Hagam shegedorim elu nasu. That's the kitaba. Though it's already become like a nature, he's done it all the time, and yet it can break through them. Kehergel nasa tevasheni, because something that you have been accustomed to becomes like second nature. It can break through that as well. And then we have the second way. Simcha has the power to break through also the fences which come with nature. Not only what you were trained to, that you acquired a tavasheni, but even what you were born with. Not only can it break through it, the power of simcha could change it around. To change him around. And to change them, your character, your midos, to change from one extreme to the other extreme. V'hainu, the Rebbe explains, Ma shehasimcha beretz hagedorim. The power of simcha to breach through boundaries is not only things that you have accustomed to, but also things that you were born with. Ma shehasimcha beretz hagedorim shebeteva toldosei. That's in the nature that you were born. Uloi rak she'oisam hamidvus she'odom. One way to breach them can be say, let's say a person wants to give naturally a limited amount of tzedakah, and you breach them. What are you, pirates? Give a lot of tzedakah. So that means you're breaking through the measure, but you're not changing it. You're just increasing it. So you're breaking through. But when we say that he's breaking through, we're saying more than that. There is a change in your natural character of your emotional state. From one extreme to the other extreme. It's not that you're doing a little more, you're breaking through, you're expanding, but you're actually turning around from one extreme to the other extreme. And gives an example. Say, for example, Mishu who comes, Vikili Biyoser, very stingy and very not giving. And that's his nature. He doesn't give. In the Beis HaSimcha, but when it comes to a Simcha, when he's happy with a great Simcha, it doesn't say it, but man, go for child. His nature, his heart will turn totally. He becomes a spender and a very kind person. So that happens through simcha. He changed his feeling from, instead of being very stingy, uh, he became a spender and a very kind, just as if he was as just as someone who is naturally splurges and a kindness naturally. To such an extent that you do kindness even with your enemy, one that you hate. That's from the Maimer. The Rebbe adds, when we say turn around, even if you have a right to hate him according to Torah, even to the one who is alive to hate him according to the Torah, so he too changes around through this simcha, that he becomes kind, does kindness with the one who he hates, and he becomes spends. So how does this all happen? So the Rebbe says, even to change an accustomed and a second nature, also how do you change it around all of a sudden? But certainly, how do you change something you were born with nature, to all of a sudden change that? Through simcha. Even in the first case, simcha, is gather that the simcha will breach through the fence that comes because became accustomed to it. So we also need to explain. The Mekivan should call Hergil Nasa Teva, since you're accustomed to it, that becomes your nature. Afshurak Teva Sheni, it's a second nature, but it's still nature. So it takes, you would need lots of time and work L'shanis Teva Zelat to change this nature little by little. How does Simcha have the power to change it in one instance? And for sure, in the second case, it's tzorich love. We need to understand how does simcha have, in the second case, that's nature now, you're born with that. How does the power of simcha have to breach through these fences that is naturally, that he came when he was born in his nature? How does that happen? To the extent that they can change his nature from one extreme to the other. How does that happen? It doesn't take time. It doesn't take work. Simcha, change it around. How did it happen? So the idea is, as explained in the Maimer there, the mash is simcha peretz is together. The fact that simcha can breach through the fences. Even in the first, when you just got to break through that you have learned nature. And certainly if it's something you were born with in the second situation, it's davke when we talk about a simcha. We're talking about a simcha that touches the essence of the soul. We're not talking about any simcha. We're talking about simcha that touches the soul. That is the simcha that breaches through all the more difficult fences, these easier fences. It all comes from the simcha peirid together, from the etzem and nefesh. That kind of a simcha. Shalemailo mikoichos hagaluyim, which is above the revealed koichos. Since the essence of the soul is higher than the definitions of limitation, the was because the etzem nefesh is tied with the essence, so it's not in the limitations of the boundaries. That's why a simcha that comes because of the etzem nefesh, it breaks through all the fences, all the limitation, and it can do it right away. And that is all, whether you're trained to it or you're even born with it. When you have that simcha of the etzem nefesh, then you are able to breach through all the limitations and bring the real level of simcha. So now that we explained that you have a different level of simcha, different levels of simcha, and the simcha that can change things is the simcha atzmis that peretzes gather, that breaks through all the boundaries. So now we'll understand why we're giving simcha to chokhmah bina, even though bina is ema bonim, is simcha by itself, and chokhmah is oinek. But these are all limited levels of simcha and oinek. They're associated with the koiches geluyim. But because we want to bring down the simcha atzmis, in order to come down to the level of zav and nukva, in order to bring about the idea of heiloda, which is the koyach atzmus, the Rebbe will explain. That's why we're saying samach to samach. Look inside. But v'zehu samach to samach ra'im ha'ahavim. This is the meaning of joyce to rejoice, these beloved friends. Shetzorich lahamshich hasimcha b'chochma ubina, that we need to draw down simcha and chochma bina. Hagam shemokam hasimcha ubina, although that the place of simcha is in bina. Ub'chochma yeshoinek shalamaylim hasimcha, and in chochma there is even the light which is higher than simcha. So why do we need to be mamshir? Ki hasimcha shebina, because the simcha that already exists in bina, before your mamshir, v'chein ha'oinek sheb'chochma, and also the oinek which is in chochma, who dugmas, hasimcha ba'oinek shemsat koiches ha'geluyim. That's similar to the joy and the delight which comes from the revealed powers. U'b'meila yesh b'zeh medida v'hagbola, and therefore there is a measure and a limitation. So, in order to be mamshich, the higher level of simcha, samach to samach, we want to bring down the higher level of simcha. Now, even though the Rebbe says, "V'hagam shepnimiyus abahu pnimiyus atik," that the inner of Abba is the inner of Keser, is the inner of Atik, which is higher than Hagbala, higher than Hishtalshus. Why are we saying this is Koiches Geluyim? But this idea that it's higher than Hishtalshus, that's not all the time. Pnimius Atik, Pnimius Abbas, Pnimius Atik, when it comes for the purpose of Yichud, when Chochma and Bina have to mate together in order to bring down to Chochma, to Zo Malchus, then the Pnimius Atik is the Pnimius of Chochma that comes down to Chochma and Bina in order to bring it down later on to Zo Malchus. But that's not there all the time, because the mating takes place at a certain time of Chochma and Bina. And therefore, that's when we're saying samach to samach during that time to bring that extra level of joy. So he says, "V'agam shepnimis Abba upnimis Atik." The inner of Abba is the inner of Atik. Ubekfrat, we're saying not only limited to pnimis Atik, it's even higher. Shakavoni loirak libchinas pnimius atik levad, not only to the inner of Atik, even higher to the first root of Atik, which is the inner and the essence of the Ein Sof, even higher than pnimius Atik. So why would we need to bring down to Chochma the level of Atzmus, the essence of the Simcha? Unlimited. Abba is already unlimited. There says no. This idea that Pnimius Abba, the Pnimius of Chochma, is connected to the Pnimius of Atik and to the highest Shoirish, to the Atzmus and Sof, that is connected to that inner union of Avaim, of Chochmah Bina, when there is a union. And again, the Yichud Zeh Tzorich Hoirer Ulahamshich. That's Samach to Samach, meaning we need to wake up, we need to arouse and draw down that level to bring about that Yichud, the higher level, the Pnimis should be shining. Shar Yichud Pnimi Da'avo Rak Leprokim. That inner Yichud of Ava Eim Chochmah Bina is only occasionally. So that means in order to get it to function and in order to get the Atzmus into Chochmah, you need to wake it up. That's the request. The Zoshim Evakshim is what we're asking. Samach to Samach Ra'im HaAhuvim. Rejoice the Ra'im HaAhuvim, Chochmah Bina. Shetumshach b'Chochmah Ubina, that they should extend into Chochmah Bina HaSimcha HaAtzmis, the essence of the Simcha. Ba'ad mipnimis v'atzmus ein sof, until to the level, all the ways up to the level of the pnimis and the atzmus ein sof, shelamaylo megeder hagbola legamre, which is entirely beyond any limitations. Shesimcha zu peiretzes kol hagdorim kinal. That joy reaches through all the boundaries, as I said before. V'al yidei zeh nase yichud pnimi de chochmah bina. When you're ma'orer, that level of the simcha atzmis, you mamshich it in the chochmah bina, that breaches all the boundaries, and this encourages the yichud of chochmah bina. Through that becomes the union of chochmah bina, V'gam yichud zeh yichud midi, and also that yichud should be a continuous, shouldn't be just the prokim, it should be a continuous through this simcha that you are misameh chochmah bina. So that is the idea, the asking for simcha to be mamshik from atzmus in order to bring down into the level of chochmah bina. What is the purpose of having the yichud of chochmah bina and having mamshik, the pnimius atik, the pnimius atzmus ein sof, the simcha atzmus? What's the goal? The goal is to be mamshik it further into zo malchus. The main intention, yichud pnimi de chochmah bina, this inner yichud of chochmah bina, that through this will be the yichud of zovanikva. Shezehu ha'ikar. Quote, this is the quote in the Maimer over there. The main thing is to bring it down further, to bring it down to chochmah bina, to zovanikva. And as explained in length in the Maimer, that in the union of Zoh and Nukva, in the spheres of the Zeir Ampin, the 6 spheres of Malchus, over there, Dafka, you have Hamshochas Etzem. Shalochein, and that's why, Meyichud Zun, for Yichud Zoh, Nukva Dafka Nase, Hisabus Chadosha, there's a new creation, Leidas HaNeshamas. Zov and Nukva that come from Avaim is not really it's Avos Chadosha. It's more like a Gilu HaHelim. It's been there, but it's come out. But to create new neshamas, that's a real new creation. And in order to have a new creation, you need the atzmus in there, as the Rebbe will explain further, that it's only the koyach atzmus to create. Ella shebechdei sheyi yichud zun. You can't have directly from samach to zun. You need it to go through chochmah bina, and from chochmah bina it comes down to zavanukva. אלא שבכדי שיהיה ייחוד זו ונוקבה, צריך ליס תחילה ייחוד פנימי דחוכמה בינה. In order for it to be the yichud of Zav and Nukva, we needed first that in the yichud of Chachma Bina. V'zeu, and this is the meaning, samach t'samach, re'im ha'ahuvim. So we're rejoicing the re'im. The re'im, that's Chachma Bina. But what's the ahuvim? We said before, ahuvim be gematria doidim. That has the gematria of doidim. Doidim is the beloved, which is Zav and Nukva. As the Rebbe brought down before, that doidim is Zav and Nukva. So you're rejoicing the re'im ha'ahuvim, so that this should be the yichud of Zav and Nukva. So it should be the union of the ahuvim. Ahuvim gematria doidim Zav and Nukva ki habakoshe shetiya hamshocha simcha b'chochma bina. We're asking that there should be an extension of joy, essence, joy of chochma bina. That will create that inner union of chochma bina. And who bishvil yichud zun, that is because of the ahuvim, because of the doidim of the yichud of Zav. So now we're saying that this is the yichud of chochma bina is because and for the yichud of Zav. And that's connected specifically to a marriage, because the idea of a marriage, it says mainly is Zav and Nukva, the Chos and the Kala. And the Chos and the Kala is to bring new life into the world, which is the Gilu of Ein Sof, which needs Atzmus. That's why we need this brach of Samach to Samach at a wedding, because by the wedding, we do the Saruso de Latata, to be mamshich the inyonim of atzmus, so that there could be there yishorim yiveret can be the level of Zav and Nukva, as we'll see. Zayin b'pized tuvon gam hashayches the bakosha zu l'simchas nesuya. We'll also understand the connection of this request to a marriage, to the joy of a marriage. The hine yodua. So first, the Rebbe is going to establish the fact that the only where creation comes from is from the atzmus, from himself. To create something that feels itself as a yesh, that it doesn't have a mocker, comes only from something that doesn't have a mocker. Only the atzmus, which mitziuse is mi'atzmuse, he comes from himself, can create something that should fill themselves. And that's why creation is associated with atzmus. Because it's known, Shahabriya yesh me'ayin hi bekoyach ha'atzmus dafke. The creation of yesh me'ayin is dafke, the power of atzmus. The chol ha'oides v'agiluyim, because all lights and all revelation mekivon sheyesh lem ila oisiba kol ponim, since they have a cause, or at least a reason. At least they have a reason. Ein b'yicholtom lahaves dover yesh. They don't have the ability to create an entity that doesn't feel that there is some cause, there's some cause or reason for his being. Like the person who feels himself a yesh, an entity, that he's around here by himself, on his own, that he belongs here, just like that. That cannot come from Giluyim, that can only come from Atzvus. The Efsher Lishum Nimtza Lahashpia, because no existence can give Mashein Bekoiche, what is not in his own power. If he is something which has a source, he cannot create something that doesn't have that Mitzius and Atzmusei. Bishabas Hayesh Hurag Bekoiche Atzmus. Therefore, to create the yesh, it's only within the power of atzmus, whose existence is of himself. There is no cause, there's no reason that comes before him, God forbid. So he doesn't have a cause. He can create something that feels that doesn't have a cause, but something which is gilui, something which is oir, they have a reason and a cause how they are here, how they're gilui, how they're functioning. Therefore, they can't create something that is not feel that it has any source. So now, this atzmus of creation, originally the Eibishter did it on his own. Yecirych Mikadem. When the Eibishter created human beings, Chesed, Hashem did it on his own. Now we have to elicit through mitzvahs all of these sarusa de latata damshochas ha'atzmus to create, for Hashem to create, for atzmus to create. It comes through our isarusa de latata. V'hinei hamshochas ha'atzmus libra yesh me'ayin sheishis me'breishis. So how to extend the atzmus to create from ex nihilo to existence during the first 6 days of creation? There was no avodas ha'odam involved then. That came because Hashem wants kindness. So the Eibishter on his own brought down atzmus to create. But after Matan Torah, in order to get atzmus to create, the Torah mitzvahs. Through avodah Torah mitzvahs, we bring down atzmus. Atzmus to create, but atzmus to bring down b'chlal atzmus in the world is Torah mitzvahs. Yesh leimar, Rebbe says, so Torah mitzvahs generally, but specifically the mitzvahs that involve, in which we see openly the koyach ha'atzmus, that is a special mitzvah that brings down, which is the marriage and birth that comes from there. Yesh leimar, shebefrat ubegilui, that in specific and openly revealed, this is through the mitzvahs that have a connection to bli gvul that you mamshich atzmus. Okemoy mitzvahs piriya v'rivya, like the mitzvah of piriya v'rivya. When you do the mitzvah of piriya v'rivya, that's sort of connected to bringing down atzmus openly. Ki yadu, as it's known, the be'inyan ha'hiloda, in the idea of birth. When you give birth, it's unlimited because one generation, another generation, lahoilid, doir achar doir, that is to create, give birth, one, there's no end. Ugilu koyach ein sof, that's a revelation of the power of the infinite. Ubefrat, and especially, so that's the non-stop, the infinite birth that come forever. But especially inyan ha'lodu gam dugmas bris yesh me'ayin, just birth itself, you bring into the world an entity that wasn't there. It's similar to yesh me'ayin. Shehi b'koyach ha'atzmus, that yesh me'ayin comes in koyach ha'atzmus. You created something that wasn't here before. V'zeu, and this is mashi b'bakshim b'simchas nesuyim, and that's why during the simcha of the nesuyim we ask samich teshmach ra'im ha'ahuvim. Eibishter to be rejoicing, bringing down the atzmus in Bina, to bring it down in Zov and Nukva. So what's the connection to the chasana here? Because kitachlis inyan has nesuyin, ushetiya ha'iloda. The goal, ultimate aspect of marriage is there should be birth. Pru, as the verse says, quoting the verse, upru revu milos aretz, be fruitful and multiply and fill the world, fill the land. That's why at that point we ask, when we're doing this particular mitzvah, which is bringing down the Ein Sof, the Atzmos, we ask Eibishter to rejoice Re'im HaAhuvim. Shetia Hamshochas HaSimcha HaAtzm is the Atzmos Ein Sof. That there should be the essence Simcha of Atzmus Ein Sof, into Bina, and then to Zoh, and to Zun, Zoh Nukva. This is also the continuation bracha. We say, כשמחך יצירך בגן עדן מקדם. Just as the simcha was experienced by your creator who created you, rejoiced in Gan Eden in the beginning. Over there in Gan Eden, it came mitzat chofetz chesed. It was a revelation of Atzmus came, the level of Simcha Atzmis came by itself. Tamshachas has Simcha began Eden Mikedem, Mitchilas Abriya, the extension of joy in Gan Eden Mikedem in the beginning, Mitchilas Abriya, of Gan Eden from the east, from the beginning of the Bria Hoysum Mitzad Ki Chofetz Chesedu. That was because of the level of Chofetz Chesed. Vezeu Mevakshim Gam Achshav. We're asking, Shagam Achshav. Idea of the Seinu B'Torah Mitzvahs through the Torah Mitzvahs B'Chlal Mamshich Atzmos U'Befrat Idea Simchas Nesuyin, in which we're Makayim the Mitzvah period of Rivia. This is to Gilu Atzmos and Sof Befrat in this Mitzvah Ti Amshocha Zu, that should be this Amshocha. So the Rebbe says that now, originally by Gan Eden, Gan Eden of the East, that was the Chofetz Chesed. But then comes Matan Torah, comes our Aveda Torah Mitzvahs to be Mamshich, the level of Atzmos, the level of Simcha. Simcha Atzmis, that comes through our Aveda. And every mitzvah, Matan Torah, we have the union of Kuchabrichu Shchinta, the Atzmus with the world. We have the Hamshocha Chochma and Bina from Zoh Malchus. Ukemoi Ches, Ukemoi Shoya B'yom Chasu Nosei, Matan Torah. So what took place at the Eibish's marriage? Over there was already Avodah. The marriage, Matan Torah, was Avodah. Then there came down, we brought down the Simcha Atzmis. As explained in the Maimer, the main Simcha that breaches all boundaries is the Simcha of marriage. That's where we have the level of the Simcha Atzmis mainly. But then, then it was through Avodah. Yecirych was without Avodah in Gan Eden, but by Matan Torah was Avodah. What kind of Avodah was it over there? So the Rebbe explains, this is Shari B'Yom Chasun Nosei Matan Torah Koi Aluchas Hashniyas. When we say Yom Chasun Nosei Matan Torah, this goes on the second luchas, in which the inner were Baalei Tshuva. Mela, the first luchas, the Eibishter came, Kofa Aleim Harkigigis, it came L'Mailo, and it wasn't so much through their Avodah, but the second, when the Eibishter said, Salachti Kidvarecha, and he gave them the luchas Shniyas, and that's the real Yom Chasun Nosei, that's already through Avodah. Being luchas Shniyas, who mashinit not the avodah dafke, they were given through avodah tshuva, and that's the Yom Chasun Nosei Matan Torah, meaning that's the luchas shniyas. Well, derech zeh became kol mitzvah, and the same thing is by all mitzvahs. By they kol mitzvah, that there is that level of hamshacha through avodah that we bring down atzmos of the king kol mitzvah. The idea called mitzvah tzorich loymar. Anytime you do a mitzvah, the idea called mitzvah tzorich liyas, that to every mitzvah there needs to be l'shem yichud kuchabrichu shchita. You have to do it to union of kuchabrichu. That's the masculine of shchita, the feminine, the yichud of zov and nukva kuchabrichu shchita. V'nisa v'preyes chayim. And notwithstanding that we only do it once a day, but it's for every mitzvah. The fact that we say fourth Baruch Shamar, we say just once, L'shem yichud, u'lefi she'amira zu hi pe'ula nimshechas hakol hayom. Because this is an impact on all day, so we say it once, but it's really every mitzvah we're making a union of כשמחך shchinta. So every time there's a union, so it's a chasana, a marriage between the כשמחך and the shchinta, the Zoh Malchus. It's a simchas nesuyin, and on top of just a marriage, the Rebbe says it's like marrying an only son, which the example of the main joy is marry off your only son, because every Yid is considered like an only son to Hashem. And since every Yid is like an only son of Hashem, as the teaching, the known teaching of the Baal Shem Tov, that the Eibishter loves every Jew like an only son that was born at their old age. So every Yid is like an only son. B'ni, it doesn't say Bonai, it says B'ni, my only son, B'choyri, my only Yisrael, Lashon Yochid. So every individual here, and also Matan Torah, to each one of you, they didn't say in a plural, you're God, but I'm individually God. He said it in a language of an individual. So this is a very specific language. So the joy of above, which is when you fulfill every mitzvah of each one of the Yidden, is simchas HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'chasunas b'nai yichidai, is the God rejoicing in the wedding of his only son. The simcha zu peretzes kol hagdorim. That simcha reaches through all the limitations. Every time we do a mitzvah, it's like making a wedding for his only son, because you make a union of כשמחך shchinte, which is a marriage of the Hashem with the world, with the neshamas Yisrael, and therefore this is a tremendous simcha, which is mamshich at the simchas nesuyin. You're mamshich the etzem level of simcha. Oistes, b'frat b'chodesh Elul, especially when we're in the month of Elul. When the king finds himself in the field with each and every one of the Yidden, he accepts everybody with a smiling face, with a good countenance. Shows him a smiling face. So the month of Elul, that marriage is the tremendous simcha, even more simcha. It's ani l'doidi v'doidi li, so it's all actually on the Elul. There's like a connection. Tafilu doidim. So the doidi, even the doidi, the zav v'nukva shegoyal zav v'nukva shezivugam hurak liprokim, who only occasionally mate, but b'chodesh Elul. But on the month of Elul, in the word Elul, you have ani l'doidi. So v'doidi li, all in Elul. So you have these doidim united. There's a union there. One word in the word of Elul. Then move on. So from this, understand the noisef alayinyan the simchas nesuyin. In addition to the joy of marriage, which yichud כשמחך shchinte, the union of כשמחך shchinte zov and nukva, shemeshach kol hashana mitzadkim mitzvahs, which is all year round when you do a mitzvahs. Hine b'chodesh Elul, when it comes the month of Elul, the Yetzer says is with more force. Month of Elul, that union is more forceful because it is all Elul, ani l'doidi, all connected in one word. And the Rebbe says, "Ubefrat b'Shabbosis b'chodesh Elul," especially when the Maimer was said, Shabbos of chodesh Elul. The Hine B'chodesh Elul toikim b'shofar, and we're going to see what the Shabbos of Elul is even greater than the whole month of Elul in the weekdays, that we don't blow the shofar. The B'chodesh Elul toikim b'shofar. Why do we blow the shofar all month of Elul? Kedei lahazir Yisrael sheyasu tshuva, so to warn the Yidden they should do tshuva, shenamat. Because as the pasuk says, what is the association of shofar with tshuva? In yitoka shofar ba'ir, v'am lo yecharodu. Will there be, the verse says, can a shofar be blown in the city and the people will not tremble? So basically, shofar brings along the trembling. Harei shebe'elul yesh gam inyan hayira v'charoda. So in Elul, there is also the idea of fear and the trembling. That's the idea of the shofar. And so besides the idea we're talking about, the simcha, Shem Yichud Kucha, and Elul, it's all in one word, but there's also the Yericharoda. But the shofar is only during the weekday. As opposed to the Shabbos during the month of Elul, so this idea of fear and trembling of the month of Elul would seem they're not open. Einam b'Shabbos. Begilu ein b'Shabbos. Open, they're not Shabbos, you don't blow, there's no trembling. Shabbos ain't taking. Shabbos, there's no blowing. B'Shabbos ain't etzemba. There's no sadness on Shabbos. There's no year, there's no tremble. Be'ikir pu'ulas b'mei HaShabbos isu. So what's the main effect of the Shabbos of Elul? Connecting the Elul, the L'doidi, V'doidi Li, Yidden and the Eibush, Simchas Nesuyin, V'HaKadosh Baruch Hu Knesset Yisrael, the joy of the marriage of כשמחך Shchita to כשמחך Knesset Yisrael. Is that move on? So this you understand. Shekol Sofa, the Torah mitzvahs, that every addition in Torah mitzvahs, Ubefrat, Chodesh Elul, especially in Chodesh Elul, Peiretzes Kol HaGedorim, that breaches through all limitations, all fences, all boundaries. Koilol Gam Gidrei HaGolus, also the boundaries of Golus, the Chol, all the fences of Golus, the Chol HaYisofe BeTorah Mitzvahs, any addition to Torah Mitzvahs, Shenyonim Hepech HaGolus, which Torah Mitzvahs is the opposite of exile. The Maheres breaches through and hastens as Hagula HaSida, the future redemption. And then the Rebbe says, Bayoimahu Yiyah. Yiyah is Yudke Yudke. Normally the name of Hashem is Yudke Vavke. But Bayoimahu, in the Geula, Yiyah will be Yudke Yudke, based upon Yudke. Which means the name of Hashem will not consist from Yudke Vavke, but the whole name will be two times Yudke. And Shagam Vavke, Yiyah Kemo Yudke. So the Vavke would be also like the Yudke. Just like Chochmo Bina is constantly mating, they will also be continuously mating. The Geula Hasida in the future redemption. Then will be the idea of marriage. Kidi Isa, B'Shmois Rabbah. The Shmois Rabbah says that the future redemption is marriage. Right now it's betrothal, the Kiddushin. But the future will be the marriage very soon in our days. I'm not so clear that the Kabbalah over here. Earlier, the Rebbe said that in order for the yichud of Zov and Nukva, there needs to be a yichud pnimi of Av ve'em, which is, Rebbe also used, I think, the language there, that it's not always, and in order to be ma'ir, that's what we're saying, samach to samach. Here the Rebbe seems to say that Vovke is not zivugayu todir, but Yudke is zivugayu todir. But over there it said you need to let someone. We got to look into the artists over here, but we'll do that another time.